A man who fixes boats for a living doesn't usually carry medical supplies in his back pocket. Miles Dusty Granger had been walking the same route for 3 years, down Harbor Street at 5:30 a.m., past the bait shop that never opened before 7, around the old pier where the fishing boats bobbed like tired ghosts in the morning mist. The people of Millfield knew his silhouette, shoulders that seemed too wide for a man who spent his days bent over engine blocks, hands that moved with the kind of precision that came from somewhere other than boat repair. He was 52, salt and pepper beard, cropped military short, eyes the color of storm clouds. The locals called him Dusty because that's what he'd told them when he'd first rolled into town in a beat-up Ford pickup with Massachusetts plates. No one asked for his last name. No one asked about the small scar that ran from his left temple to his jaw, or why he always seemed to scan the horizon before he spoke, or why his toolkit contained items that didn't belong in a marine mechanic's arsenal. The teenagers working summer jobs at the marina gave him a wide berth. Something about the way he moved, deliberate, measured, like he was calculating distances and exit routes without thinking about it. Their parents whispered sometimes, wondering if he was running from something, if he might be the type to go postal one day. But Dusty kept to himself, did good work, and paid his bills on time. In a town where the biggest excitement was usually a nor'easter or a fishing tournament, that was enough. This particular Saturday morning was different. The annual Millfield Founders Day Festival was setting up in the town square, and Dusty's usual route was blocked by vendor trucks and carnival rides. He could have turned back, taken the long way around, but something made him continue toward the commotion. Maybe it was the smell of funnel cake batter mixing with salt air, or the sound of children's laughter echoing off the colonial-era buildings. Maybe it was just curiosity. He found himself standing at the edge of the crowd, watching families set up folding chairs and teenagers string lights between the elm trees. A volunteer with a clipboard approached him, probably to ask if he wanted to help, but something in his posture made her think better of it. She smiled nervously and moved on. That's when the brake line snapped. The delivery truck, a white panel van loaded with tables and chairs for the festival, had been backing down the slight incline of Harbor Street when the driver's foot went straight to the floor. No resistance, no stopping power. The van picked up speed, heading directly toward the crowd of families setting up near the gazebo. Most people froze. Some screamed. A few had the presence of mind to yell, "Truck!" but their voices were lost in the chaos of children playing and volunteers hammering stakes into the ground. Dusty didn't freeze. He moved with the fluid efficiency of someone who had spent 18 years responding to chaos, first toward the van, then immediately calculating trajectories and impact zones. The truck would hit the corner of the gazebo, where a family with 3 small children was spreading out a picnic blanket. Impact in 12 seconds, maybe 10. "Get back!" His voice cut through the morning air like a blade, not shouting but projecting with the kind of authority that made people obey without thinking. "Clear the gazebo now!" The family scrambled, scooping up children in blankets, but the mother stumbled, her ankle turning on the uneven ground. She went down hard, the youngest child, maybe 4 years old, rolling from her arms. The van clipped the gazebo's corner support beam, sending splinters of white-painted wood flying like shrapnel. The impact spun the vehicle into a cluster of vendor tables, metal folding chairs scattering like leaves in a hurricane. When it finally stopped, the sudden silence was worse than the noise had been. 3 people were down. The mother with the twisted ankle crying but conscious. An elderly man who had been setting up a church information table, now pinned under a collapsed canopy, blood seeping from a gash on his forehead. And worst of all, a teenage boy who had been helping his grandmother with her craft booth. He was lying motionless, his face pale and breathing shallow. While everyone else stood in shocked silence, Dusty was already moving. He knelt beside the teenager first, 2 fingers finding the pulse point on his neck. Weak, thready, but there. The boy's airway was partially blocked, blood from a cut lip. Without hesitation, Dusty tilted the kid's head back, cleared his mouth, and began what looked like CPR, but was something more precise, more professional. "Sir, the ambulance is coming," someone started to say. "20 minutes out," Dusty replied without looking up. "He needs help now." From his back pocket, he pulled out a small first aid kit wrapped in canvas, the kind of compact trauma pouch that looked more comprehensive than the usual civilian supplies. His movements were economical, practiced. Clear the airway, establish stable breathing, check for serious injuries. A woman in a festival volunteer t-shirt approached, her face pale. "Are you a doctor?" "No, ma'am." Dusty's hands never stopped moving. He was checking the boy's pupils now, looking for signs of head trauma. "But I've done this before." He moved to the elderly man next, quickly assessing the head wound. Scalp lacerations always looked worse than they were, but the man was conscious and talking. Dusty pulled out medical gauze and began pressure bandaging with practiced efficiency. "You're going to be fine, sir," he said quietly. "Stay with me. Tell me your name." Harold Brennan." "Good. Harold, I need you to keep talking to me. Tell me about your grandchildren." While Harold talked, Dusty worked. The bandaging was solid, not the sloppy field dressing of a first aid course, but the precise, effective work of someone who had done this when lives depended on it, when chaos was all around and help was far away. By the time the ambulance arrived, all 3 victims were stable. The teenager was conscious and breathing normally. Harold's bleeding had stopped. The mother was sitting up, her ankle elevated and properly supported with materials improvised from the festival setup. The EMT who took over looked down at the medical work that had already been done, then up at Dusty. "This is good work, really good work. You prior military?" Dusty was already backing away from the scene, trying to disappear into the crowd that had gathered. Something like that. But Dr. Amanda Rivera, who had arrived with the ambulance, wasn't ready to let him go. She had been a combat medic in Iraq before medical school, and she recognized the signs, the way he had prioritized patients, the quality of his trauma care, the professional supplies. "Excuse me," she called out. "That wasn't civilian first aid. That was trauma medicine. Where did you learn to do that?" Dusty paused, half turned away from her. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Not fear, but something deeper, something that carried weight. "I used to save people when everything went wrong," he said quietly. Dr. Rivera's eyes widened. She knew that look. Every service member who had worked in combat medicine knew that look. "You're a PJ." Dusty didn't answer. He just nodded once, the kind of acknowledgement that carried respect and recognition, and walked away. That evening, as the festival continued around the cordoned-off accident scene, a young woman named Lisa Martinez found herself following Dusty's route back toward the marina. She was a reporter for the local newspaper, and she had been digging into public records all afternoon. She found him sitting on the end of the pier, looking out at the water. "Technical Sergeant Miles Granger," she said. 18 years, United States Air Force Pararescue. Bronze Star, Air Force Commendation Medal, Combat Action Medal, tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, Haiti, and Hurricane Katrina response. Dusty didn't turn around. "That's ancient history. Your last deployment was in Afghanistan, March 2020. Your helicopter went down during a medical evacuation. You were the only survivor." Now he turned. His eyes were tired, but there was something else there too. Something that looked like old pain, carefully managed. "You lost your whole team," Lisa continued more gently now. 4 other pararescue specialists. You spent 4 days in hostile territory before extraction. You retired immediately after medical leave. Ma'am, I'd appreciate if you didn't print that. Why didn't you ever tell anyone what you did? What you were? Dusty was quiet for a long moment, watching a fishing boat navigate the harbor channel. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I remember the ones I couldn't save. Lisa sat down beside him on the pier, uninvited but not unwelcome. Those people today, they're going to be fine. Harold Brennan is going to see his grandchildren grow up. The Thompson kid is going to play football again. Their families are going to have Christmas morning and birthday parties and all the things that matter because of what you did. That's their business, Dusty said. Not mine. But it is yours. You can't save everyone, Sergeant, but you saved them. Today. Here. That has to count for something. Dusty stood up, brushing off his jeans. I fix boats, ma'am. That's what I do now. But as he walked away, Lisa saw him reach into his jacket pocket and pull out something small and metallic. In the fading light, she couldn't quite make out what it was, but she watched as he held it for a moment, then gently tossed it into the water. The next morning, Dusty's route was the same. Harbor Street at 5:30 a.m., past the bait shop, around the old pier. But when he reached the town square, where cleanup crews were still working on the accident scene, he found a small crowd waiting for him. Harold Brennan was there, his head properly bandaged, standing with his wife and 3 grandchildren. The Thompson family was there too, their teenage son pale but upright, his arm around his grandmother's shoulders. Other townspeople too, people who had been at the festival, people who had heard the story, people who had lived in Millfield their whole lives and were just now understanding that the quiet man who fixed their boats was someone special. They didn't applaud. They didn't make speeches. They just stood there, a silent acknowledgement of what he had done, what he had been, what he still was. Dusty stopped, looked at them for a long moment, then nodded once. The same small nod he had given Dr. Rivera. Recognition, respect, understanding. Then he continued on his route, same as always. But now when the teenagers at the marina saw him coming, they didn't step aside. They nodded. The older fishermen touched the brims of their caps. The vendors setting up for the farmers' market called out good morning. Dusty still didn't talk much. He still kept to himself. He still carried first aid supplies in his back pocket and walked like he was calculating distances and exit routes. But now when children played too close to the water, he watched. When storms came in hard and fast, he was the first person other fishermen looked for. When the high school football team needed someone to teach them basic first aid, Coach Martinez knew who to call. Some wounds need salt water, not applause. But some services once rendered can never be forgotten. And sometimes being seen for who you really are is worth more than all the medals in the world. In towns across America, there are men and women who carry invisible scars from their service. Mechanics who were once medics, teachers who were once operators, janitors who were once the difference between life and death in places most of us will never see. They don't wear their service on their sleeves because they understand that true strength often whispers while weakness shouts. Echo Bravo exists to honor these quiet heroes, to remind us that heroism doesn't always announce itself with fanfare, and that sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moment when their skills are needed most. If you believe these stories matter, if you think America should remember all her heroes, not just the ones who make headlines, then consider subscribing to Echo Bravo, because every veteran has a story worth telling, and every story deserves to be heard.